everybody, it's Aubrey with Empath Alchemy Toolkit, and I want to talk to you about one of my favorite intuitive tools. It is about understanding personality characteristics through the lens of archetypes, and this video is going to focus on how to recognize the internal dialogue of your self-talk and how to just begin to recognize the archetypes that we're operating from our mental emotional place. So, and when we start doing that, it's going to naturally apply with other people we interact with, but we're going to first start talking about us and what's going on in our own mind. So I have I made a couple slides here. Let me just share my screen and pull this up for you. Let's see. Okay. So archetypes. So we're going to talk about your authentic archetypes because everyone has, I like to believe that when we were born, we came here into this life with authentic aspects, and we have a contract, things that we are planning to do as souls when we come into this world. And there's characteristics so authentic to our soul. And as we're raised and as we're growing up, we have to go through these earthly, worldly gates, and we have to get some kind of archetypal coordinate around very earth issues. Sometimes that can put us in this place of survival, like we compromise our authenticity out of the need to survive. I'm going to do another video about survival archetypes, but right now I want you to just get really clear with your authentic characteristics and start to connect authentic archetypes to that. So we'll start with what is an archetype. There's lots of different ways of understanding archetypes. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, really coined the word archetype in the 1900s. So he recognized, as a psychologist, he started to recognize certain patterns that different people had, and he started using this term archetype. So the way I like to understand archetypes is I like to imagine them energetically. Like if you can imagine yourself, if you imagine how we have wheels of light in our body, just like as energy in our energy systems, let's kind of just take that same model and imagine we have these archetypal characteristics that we operate from. We have our go-tos, we have the ones that we used to be more, maybe there's we have the strong artist archetype that we ignore, or just as an example, but there's something that's innately part of us that we're really not connected to anymore, or not as much as we'd really like to be because of survival patterns. But just think of this as like the mental, emotional parts of our character and things that we naturally kind of operate from. When we walk into a room, when we interact with certain people, some people bring out certain things in us. So let's just start imagining that. Let's see. So imagine these as channeled characters of our mental emotional state, reflecting our actions and our reactions. So archetypes, like anything, like if we want to talk about our chakra system, we can always talk about them in their most optimal state, and we can talk about them in their most dysfunctional state. They're always going to have a fundamental desire that's going to be neutral. So as archetypes, I like to, when I discuss them, I usually say potential and shadow, and then I'm going to talk about their neutral fundamental desire. So that's how Carolyn Mays, I'm going to talk about Carolyn Mays. That's how Carolyn Mays talks about him. My favorite author on this subject is Carolyn Mays. She's written a lot of books about archetypes. So she explains them as a stencil. You're going to be able to identify a shape, a pattern. You're going to identify these generalized characteristics, but each individual is going to color them in with their unique personalities. Archetypes take on many variations, yet they're going to have a common desire. So we're going to start to see that. We're going to discuss that though, moving forward. So one thing, when you start to look at your authentic archetypes, you can just start to journal this. What really motivates you? What gets you up? What gets you going? What gets you through things? When there's a group, when there's like an event and you're there and there's a group of people and you're like, these are my people, I am in my element. What are those events? Who are those people? So what certain characteristics in people make you run, or, you know, make someone, when you first meet someone, you recognize a characteristic, you kind of write them off. You're like, oh, I see this in this person. I'm going to avoid this person as much as possible now that I see this characteristic. And then the same, like, what kind of characteristics really trigger you emotionally, mentally? Where do you feel connected and spiritual? You know, what connects you to something bigger outside of yourself? What kind of rituals or ceremonies? What kind of, maybe even like just certain practices that you do on your own that make you feel really connected? What are your favorite creative outlets? And then the spoken and unspoken rule question. This is something you'll probably be able to answer later. Maybe you know right now, but what kind of rules do you have? Like social rules, ethical rules? And sometimes you might be able to, like, this is the rule of the house. These are like the rules of my house. Or sometimes you're going to have these unspoken rules where, you know, someone raises their, like, a certain tone of voice might be like, ooh, these are going to be like unspoken rules that I think that question's probably easier to answer the further you get in this work. But if you can kind of think of something right now, just start brainstorming and let yourself add more to these questions as you move along with the archetype work. So when you reassess and consider what's working and what could use support. So this is about, like, what things in your life and who you are really working for you, and where do you want to start to shift? Where do you want to grow? What patterns are you wanting to really consciously work on? So what patterns do you want to shift? What emotions do you want to have more of in your life? What would you like your inner introspection to like, what kind of inner introspections would you like to shift? Would you like to change for yourself? If you know, like, I had to work really hard on my poor me victim mindset. Like, I realized as I started doing this work how easy it was for me to just jump into poor me, like overwhelm and victim mode. Like, oh, really, all of this? Oh, of course this happens to me. Like, that was like my internal dialogue all the time about all kinds of little things that had nothing to do. I realized that how much I was just blaming, like how easy it was for me to get into this mental victim when I started doing this work. So what personal characteristics about you that you're really grateful for, that you're happy that you have inside of you, that's like this built compass of ethics and morals inside of you that you see other people don't have and that you're grateful for? What gives you a sense of spiritual connection? And then when we want to create affirmations to alchemize these thought patterns, like for me, the poor me, I had to start saying to myself when I caught myself, and I still completely do this, like, oh, really? You gotta be joking. Like, this is my internal thoughts. Like, of course this happens to me today. I catch myself. So then I have to change it to, I am capable of handling this right now. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to move through this. I'm going to move forward. And so I had to just work with that alchemy, that mental alchemy, and shifting my mindset so I can start developing a coping mindset rather than a poor me mindset. Like, so then if some situation happens, my brain goes straight to, I can handle this. Deep breath, let's move through this kind of thing. So alchemy is referring to taking one thing and transmuting it into a polished or refined version of it. So we're talking about these polarities. We're talking about, I mean, alchemy, the word alchemist is from the days when men were turning lead into gold. So something happened with the light in here. That's okay. So what kind of metaphorical situations that feel unrefined, these lead situations, and where's the gold in that? How can you shift that into something that works for you, or that vibrates, the frequency is higher for you? So getting clear with our authentic selves and visualizing them in the highest frequency is the first step. So if I know that I tend to feel sorry for myself easily, what's the opposite of that is like, I feel like I'm grateful. I live from a place of gratitude, and I feel capable, and I feel confident in myself. And so recognizing the metaphorical lead in my life, and really focusing and visualizing myself as this capable, strong person who's confident, who could take things on, who knows life isn't going to hand me anything that I can't handle. And if it does, that I have other resources, I have support systems, I have, just that internal trust in myself is going to really support this shift. And also, when I can see this, when I really visualize it and I can feel it, when I can feel confidence in my body, that is going to anchor in the reality. It's really about the feeling. It's really about anchoring in the emotions and living from a place of elevated emotions. If I know I want this certain thing in my life, and I can picture how I'm going to feel, getting that thing is really the glue, or the vehicle to getting there, is shifting my emotions to how I want to feel. So making that an emotional reality for me today is going to create this vision of myself tomorrow. And the more I sink into it and own it, the faster it's going to be my real reality. So we can look at our shadow aspects and traits. We can look at what we've been working on as we open up to these blind spots. We're going to become more aware of, as we do this work, we're going to become more aware of this practice. This is alchemy. So when we have this vision of when we know our authentic self, and we can visualize who we are in the highest version of ourselves, and we can own our shadow aspects, that is the practice of alchemy. When we have resistance to looking at shadow aspects of ourselves, we're not practicing alchemy. We have no traction. We have to be able to do both, and we have to be able to own these shadow aspects of ourselves so we can work with the opposite pole. Okay? The real medicine here is about radical self-love, self-acceptance, soul esteem. When we wake up to shadow aspects, sometimes it can trigger a lot of shame. We really have to work with this. We really have to work with soul esteem. Like, I am good enough. I am doing this now. The stories that I have in my past have brought me to this place right now. So it takes a lot of just unconditional self-love to do this work as alchemists. We have to cultivate the ability to ground into a healthy ego as we merge our daily life, operating from a place of self-mastery, operating from this place of merging into the vision that we have of ourselves. So once people can observe themselves in an unhealthy survival pattern while it's actually happening, they gain this traction to create the alchemy and shift it within itself. Like I was just saying. So this is where we gain the perspective through the lens of energetics, elements, and archetypes. We can understand our thought patterns and our emotional reactions that are not serving us. We can observe them. We can learn how to shift this energy, and then we're going to start creating a new pattern as we heal and ground into a different way. So this is the process of operating from our primal amygdala part of our brain into our frontal lobe. So we're really shifting the way our brain fires and wires. We're moving from survival mode into the frontal lobe where we use more awareness and logic. This is a practice. It's not linear. This is a cyclical practice. So the alchemical process between our vision and our shadow is a daily practice. Some days we're going to do better with it. Some days we're not. Just like, you know, I love yoga. Some days I can balance easier. Some days I can do a handstand. Some days I cannot. It's something to be reassessed regularly. It's a necessary practice for soul esteem, to be gentle with ourselves, to constantly give ourselves love, to remember that this work is not linear. We go through things in layers, and the patterns that we have are always going to be there. So my victim is always going to be there. Things like, you know, my addict archetype is always going to be there. And when we accept our shadow archetypes, and we're not afraid to call them out, because sometimes there might be a pattern that we don't want to look at, and it can come up, it can just sneak up, and we just don't want to look at it so much that we're operating from it and we're completely blind to it. So if I know that I have a victim mindset quite easily, or addict tendencies, and I have come to peace with that, and I have accepted that myself, it is easier to catch myself when I begin eating fruit in the kitchen over the sink. Like, I quit sugar a long time ago, but if I'm eating like sugary fruit, like I let myself have a little bit of fruit, like I have an allergy, but I catch myself in moments, I'm like, this is an addictive pattern. I need to step aside and take a deep breath, or I need to just witness it and be okay with it and not judge myself as well. That's another thing. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm in my addict right now. Here we go. Another apple. I know it sounds funny too, like, but just with my journey, my sugar journey is interesting. We'll talk about that another time. So, but basically, when we are okay with these patterns, we can be okay with them. We can catch ourselves in them, we can observe them, and we can work with them in a new way. So my next video is going to be about the archetypes of the soul, and I will be creating that and sharing it soon. I hope you will join me there. And that's all for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Take care.